Get a small team together of people, like-minded people, who are passionate about your film.
You write from your heart and passion and instinct first and foremost. You're going to tap into some universal stuff.
Don't show guns.
Comedy tells the truth, and specifically it tells the truth about people.
There's a lot of talented people that never make it because they don't understand the business.
You just finished your script and you think it's awesome, but there could be red flags hidden throughout that scream amateur.
This episode is brought to you by GlideCam Stabilizers. A GlideCam on your production means smooth, flowing shots with easy operation. Go to glidecam.com to find out more.
Adam Coplan is a screenwriter, a producer, a director, a professor, and now the author of Being Professional, a master guide to the do's and don'ts of screenwriting. He's worked on films such as The Matrix, I, Robot, and The Truman Show. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you very much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here.
All right, let's talk about the difference between amateur and a professional.
Well, whether it's learning by reading books, of which there are many, or out of a classroom, typically you get the academics involved with screenwriting, and that's great. And obviously some teachers and some books are better than others. But what is rarely provided is the industry perspective, what agents are looking for, what production companies are looking for, the common mistakes that amateur writers make that oftentimes will predispose a reader to, stop reading after, a few pages or even not read at all based on stupid things, easily avoided things like using wrong fonts or, improper formatting, things that are essentially signals or indicators to a professional, to someone in the industry, that if you haven't taken the time to learn that a script should be written, for example, simply in Courier or Courier Final Draft, that you probably have missed in other areas as well, areas that are much more important. And so when you make dumb mistakes like that, it predisposes someone to reject your work long before they've even had a chance to really immerse themselves in it. And then there's obviously far more substantive situations like a lack of outlining, for example, which breeds all sorts of problems, mainly in structure, usually poor second acts, that sort of thing. Because when someone comes up with an idea for a movie, and we all have those, you have that moment of inspiration. It usually includes the inciting incident, the first act break, significant elements of your first act, your main character, and probably some sense of the climax, how it's going to end. Not necessarily what the scene is going to be, but how it's going to end, who's going to come out victorious, whether the conflict will be resolved, that sort of thing. But what is never part of those ideas is the second act, which is by far the most significant part of the movie, the longest part of a script, the longest part of a film. And a lot of amateurs, a lot of students, a lot of people that are approaching screenwriting with a new idea, thinking that it's easy to get into it, they don't outline because they want to go right from that idea right to the keyboard, right to the computer and get it down as quickly as possible. And so invariably what happens is it's usually one of three things. They'll write 30 pages and it flows really well because that's all the idea that they had. And then they hit a brick wall and quit because they don't know where to go from there. They don't know how to bridge the gap to the third act. The second scenario, which is also quite common, is that they usually have a second act that's relatively short. They get exactly what they need very quickly. They only encounter maybe one or two obstacles and it's smooth sailing, and they reach that third act very, very quickly. And what ends up happening is you have a script that ends up being 70 or 80 pages, and a rationalization begins that, a script can be that short, a script can be that that length because they've seen it before. They've seen movies that are, a shade under an hour and a half, and so that rationalization kicks in, and they go with it. And what you have is a very weak script with a very short and abbreviated second act. And the other scenario is sort of the opposite, which is a second act that never ends. It's often very repetitive, and same kind of thing happens, except that rationalization is not that it's too short, It's that 140 pages or 130 pages is okay. They've got this never-ending second act, which is wildly overwritten and usually filled with redundancies. And then almost invariably a abbreviated third act because they realize they're running long, and so they hurry that. And those structural errors are a function of no outlining, which is very, very common among amateurs.
Oh, what advice would you give to an amateur on how to outline? What's the steps involved?
Well, there are lots of different ways to outline. I create one or propose one in my book, which is what I use, which I call the roadmap. I think it's a personal thing. I think people should outline how they choose to outline. The method I use, typically when it comes to screenwriting, one of the things that scares people a lot is that blank page, that sense of how do I fill 100 or more blank white pages? And it's daunting and it's intimidating and it's very, very scary. With the roadmap that's in the book, you break that down using the major plot points: the inciting incident, the first act break, the midpoint, the second act break, the climax, and then there's a couple of added ones, the early complication, the denouement. And what that does is that instead of 100 or 120 blank pages, the biggest gap you then have to fill once you lay in those major beats, those major plot points, you're going to have to fill maybe 15 or 20 pages between the plot points. And what that does is, instead of having too much space, usually you have not enough, because once you only need to fill 15 pages, you have to sit there and say, okay, well, what needs to be there? And it forces you to prioritize the scenes that have to be there. It forces you to figure out that one scene that you want to make 5 pages really can only be 2. And a lot of times it forces you to prioritize scenes over others and realize that certain things either aren't necessary or there isn't room for them. So whether you use my method or other methods, I don't care whether you do it on a computer or use a legal pad or use index cards. There's lots of popular methods. The most important thing I would say for any aspiring screenwriter or any writer really, any screenwriter of any experience level, is you must outline. You must give yourself some sort of guide to make sure that you're structured correctly, that you have all the important beats, that you're writing a script that has everything it needs to have to be viewed as professional grade and hopefully to be embraced by the industry.
As a last point, when you're filling this white space, what's something that you should not put into a script?
You should not put into a script.
Well, we were talking about, the credits and everything earlier on. That's really struck me.
Well, a lot of aspiring screenwriters emulate, because they don't know better. They emulate scripts that they've seen in that they've gotten online or they've seen in magazines or whatever it may be. And 9 times out of 10, those scripts are production drafts, and so they include a lot of things that shouldn't be in what's called a spec draft, or it stands for speculative. It's essentially a script that doesn't have that hasn't been bought yet. It's something that you're hoping to sell. And at that stage of the process, a script shouldn't include things like songs, names of songs. If you add Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones, or you add I Heard It Through the Grapevine, if you add a song like that and you say in your script that should play over the credits or that should be in the scene, you're adding 6, maybe even 7 figures to your budget. And you may be working with an independent film that doesn't even have a budget that big for the whole movie. And even if you're working on a studio movie, you can't be choosing those things. It's not a writer's job anyway. A lot of amateur screenwriters do the jobs of other people. They talk about a shot, crane into this. Well, that's a director's decision whether they're going to use a crane, whether they're going to iris in or fade out or dissolve to this. Those aren't writers' choices. Those are directorial choices, just like the music supervisor is going to get involved with song selection, indicating some sort of elaborate James Bond credit sequence at the beginning. There may not even be opening credits in your movie. Again, that's not a decision you'll be making. When you describe your main character, when you suggest that character should be George Clooney, that's not your decision either. That's going to be a producerial choice with the director, with the casting director, and so forth. And if anyone but George Clooney reads that script, well, I'm not going to say it's going to be insulting to be viewed as a George Clooney type, but Matthew McConaughey doesn't want to be described as George Clooney-like. He wants to be Matthew McConaughey. So, talking about actor choices, directorial choices, song selections, that sort of thing, those are red flags to someone that you're an amateur. Those are red flags that shouldn't be in a spec script, because it's not your decision to make those things, and it's just a red flag that you don't really know what you're doing.
All right, Adam. How can people get a hold of you if they have any questions?
My website is justscreenwrite.com, justscreenwrite.com, just like it sounds. I'm doing an event September 24th at the Writer's Store in Burbank. There will be other events upcoming that I'll put on the website, but the easiest way to get to me is the website, where you can email me directly.
All right, Adam. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Versatile, lightweight GlideCam stabilizer. A GlideCam on your production means smooth flowing video with easy operation. GlideCam, the name and future of camera stabilizers.